Hi guys, Bomber here. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're gonna do a CCC. Before starting this week's CCC, I will announce the next week's CCC, which will be aesthetics. So you need to design a card which has the same number repeated, possibly, in the card. So for example, you could do a card which has, for example, one cost, it attacks one times per turn, it has 1 health points and draws a card, for example, if it is a Vespitole card. So that was my example, and so you need to have only one number in that card, and if you want you can repeat it, obviously. So that's it for this next week CCC, and let's jump into this week's CCC instead. So, just a quick reminder before we start, this week's CCC was the Mysterious Hero, so you needed to design a hero card, based on this fan art, which comes from Rory Lane Luther, and you can check out his works at arthavoc.com, so it is also on the art here, under the fan art. And also you needed to design his hero card, so with that said, let's jump into the reviews. So, at the last place, we have Teen Chief from Imaginary MDA. It's an hero card, and its hero power reads, each turn, sacrifice weakest ally and attack. Then his hero card is Lord of the Flies, and it is an idol. It costs 0 gold, and it reads, sacrifice an ally, attack, and the target retaliates. It also has a flavor text, which reads, what are we, humans or animals or savages? And it is from an unknown. So I gave this card 2 points out of 5 in design, and 2 points out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 6 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is for the design, because really I like the flavor of the card. Like the user described it as it is a chief, so a teen chief, so it is a teenager just in his like teenager age, with just dreams about being a chief of the Daramek faction, but in fact it is not. And so you could see him impersonate his power by grabbing the heart and pulling it to the sky, like it is impersonating, it is acting like a chief, but in fact it is not. So definitely a pretty good flavor with the hero, but other than that, the effects are pretty uninteresting. So, and also like both of them are based on sacrifice, weakest sacrifice an ally. They both attack, so really a pretty not that there is not so imagination in this card. If with that good of a flavor, I would like if more the flavor of the card would have been represented in its effects. I couldn't think about anything representing the fact that it is a thin ship, but really I don't see the flavor in the effects. So really that could have been done much better, in my opinion, for the design. Instead, for the balance, I really think that it's very weak. The hero power in particular is just pretty much straightforwardly useless, because you are sacrificing your board, and yes, it's true that you gain an attack, but and probably think about it, if you're playing an orphan gang, then it already attacked, then probably next turn it will first of all trigger, so that's an attack, and then you sacrifice it to attack once more with the teen ship. So that's double the attack from an orphan gang, but you are sacrificing those stats from later turns, and probably it will clog up your hand by needing to redraw it, and then you can't actually have more than one ally early on in the game, so you just need to recycle through them, and probably that's the point of the card, to just recycle through your allies. And also the Lord of the Flies does pretty much the same thing, so allowing you to just sacrifice your allies for free, which is probably pretty strong, because if you then play like Overseer into Rat Catchers, whatever, and then you play all your allies again, then you can just recycle through your allies, and that's pretty cool. But to do and to start that kind of engine, also with this type of hero effect, which just sacrifices all your board in the first place on the early stages, it's pretty much a slow process, and not that much good, in my opinion, even. So really, I think this card is pretty much too weak, and that's why I went for 2 points out of 5 in balance. And then we have Insidiosus from DFY Pestilence. It's a Metris hero, so definitely that's pretty interesting. I thought we went towards the Daramek faction here, but he went for the Metris. but can have up to 5 cards from Darmok faction. So it is an alternative hero. It's both Medris and Darmok, so definitely that's pretty interesting and pretty unexplored territory for card design, so definitely pretty interesting. It also has a flavor text which reads, going deep undercover, method acting to such a degree as risk of going native, of becoming more like your targets than your people. Still, when properly directed, even they can be of use. Greta speaking of Insidiosus to the Metris Council. It also has his hero card, which is Infiltrator, a Metris minion. It costs 2 gold, and it reads on play / turn, become a copy of a Foe Zali until discarded, and it also has 55% chance to destroy when killed, like all Metris cards. And it has 1 health points. It also has a flavor text, which reads, Metris infiltration agents practice acting to beyond the point of art. To them, it is a science, one with risk of nativization, but the benefits to Medris as a whole generally outweighs those risks. And for when it does not, well, that is what assassination is for. So definitely pretty interesting flavor text like always. But returning to the card, I give this card 3 points out of 5 in design and 1 point out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 7 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because for the design, it is pretty much regarding the balance. So in the design aspect, I did take into consideration also the balance, and I will explain why in a moment. But first of all, I want to say that, as I said before, it's a very, very good idea, but it is made in a bad execution. And the reason why for this is because for the design aspect only, I will talk only about this in the design, and then I will talk about the balance. If a card like this would have been balanced, if it was balanced right now, but then the design would have been pretty much wrong, because think about the next things, the future. So if a card like this is being released, then every time you are designing a new card for both Darmok and Metris, you need to be pretty careful about this card, because these cards can use both of them. And probably one card which is fine in Darmok will not be fine in Metris, and this card can work around this thing by using strong cards which are very good synergistically into another faction and can abuse those type of things. So really having a card like this released is a pretty bad design because it's too broad of an effect and will pretty much hinder all the designs of all future cards. So that's for the design. And as you may have noticed, I said if this card was balanced right now, and it is really not. It's really too strong, because for example, having rights plus the Deceit or Impersonate or whatever cards like cheap cards we know as Medris has access to, it's pretty strong, and we have already an example of this in tournament, like for example with Daru, which already is very strong by abusing rights and Deceits and Impersonate and cheap spell from Metris. So we already have that. Then we also could use allies, really strong allies, which are available to Darmok, plus the Stratagem, which is really a very bad card in design, as I said before, because Stratagem pretty much hinders the design of all those type of cards, like for example, which are cross factions and whatever. So really that's pretty too strong. And also we could use Scriva Dance, so Scrivener plus Ceremonial Dance, plus Bombs or Arsenic or whatever very big stuff we have in Metris, and which pretty much scale up the more we have copies of. Like for example, Arsenic is the best of those things, it's the best example. So really I do think it will be very, very, very much too strong, and so for that reason I went for 1 balance out of 5. Then at the third place, actually the second, because we have a tie, we have Dazu from Xoros, a really bad player. It's an hero, and this hero power reads feed hero magic and gain a warrior. So a warrior is a non-turn attack, and it has 1 health points, and also destroy on this card. Then his hero card is Raid, it costs 7 gold, and it reads sacrifice all allies, attacks for victim's life, and for each sacrificed feed hero magic. So, I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design and 3 points out of 5 in balance for a final rating of 9 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because for the design, I pretty much don't like the hero power of the hero, because really it's a bit too specific. And I know that cards can have whatever effects, and it's obviously true, but I pretty much like the simple things on heroes. Like for example, look at Vespitole. It's straightforwardly +1 resource of the basic ones, except magic. Then we have Isadora, which has health points. So they actually interact with the mechanics, which are really, really the base of the game. Like for example, whatever. For example, Barbarus converts resources, which are another time a pretty straightforward mechanic, which is at the basic of the game. So there are some exceptions, like for example, Mogesh is probably one of the most specific and strange hero effects. Ezra is not, because it redraws cards, so it's another time a mechanic from the game. Some other too much of a specific effects are, for example, the Ndazu ones. Like for example, Gizmai has feed an ally to an anima with magic to increase its charges, so it's pretty specific. But really, most of the times, heroes should try and be simple, and this one is not, in my opinion. It is a bit too specific. It summons a specific card, which is it comes only from E0 effect, so really just too specific in my tastes. Instead, for balance, I think that raid may be too OP. Because for example, in pretty much Barbarus deck, but with the actually no, because the hero card can be used in other decks. So for example, using raid in a Barbarus deck, which has a lot of idols, and in particular it synergizes with the Erding Stones. So yeah, that was the name. With Erding Stones, you pretty much sacrifice all allies. Then for example, if you have 4 Erding Stones out, then for each sacrifice you feed 1 magic. So for every 4 sacrifice, you feed 4 to your hero, which should activate all the 4 Erding Stones, and so you actually don't sacrifice anything at all, because you are resummoning 1 ally per ally sacrifice. So that's a thing. Another thing could be like just spam a spam deck with a lot of allies, like for example slaves, which we know that are good at doing that, or for example even goats with the goat poultice. So spam a lot of allies and then have, for example, a lot of boar fetishes, and just finish the game with this thing. So I know that it needs a lot of setup. Also, it's a pretty high costly card, but so that's the problem with this. It is either OP, so it is too strong, or either too costly and so not so like a win more card. So if you have already a good economy, you already have a good board, then this is just, yes, you win the game, but probably you already have won the game. So it's really just probably it obviously needs testing, but in my opinion it is either too strong of a win condition or not a win condition at all, because it's only you already won. Let's just win right now, but you already have won. So that's it for this card. And then at the second place we have Chiron from Greening of Decay Gene. It's an hero card from Daramek. Its hero power reads on turn, 35% chance per idol to feed hero magic. It also has a flavor text, which reads, once a scholar of the Endatsu court, exiled for use of heretical magics, he searched the world for true power and found it in blood. So definitely pretty Daramek thematic. Then we have his hero card, which is Keeper of Bones. It costs 5 gold, it has 12 points, and reads on buy, restock idol, on play, feed the hero magic, and on play idol, +1 either gold, food, or skull. So I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design and 3 points out of 5 in balance for a final rating of 9 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because for the hero effect, another time, I will probably make it a more simple one. Like for example, the core mechanic of this hero power would be feed hero magic, right? So I will probably remove the 35% chance per idol thing and just be straightforwardly on turn feed hero magic. And this change will pretty much do some things, like on the early game it will probably be stronger, obviously, if it was only on turn feed hero magic, but on the later stages it will be less strong, because if you have 4 idols on average, this should be 1.2 magic per turn fed to your hero, and so that will be more, obviously, on average, I did say. That will be obviously more than on turn feed 1 magic to your hero on average. So So yeah, it is stronger in the early game, but weaker in the late game. So probably it could still be balanced in that way, but way more simpler, and probably would be of better design in my opinion. Therefore, the Keeper of Bones, probably it goes for the same thing. I like to have the most simple things which are still interesting, and this card has some things that are really interesting, like for example the on-buy restock idol. It works pretty much like what we have already in Daramek, like for Earths, but this is for idols, so definitely pretty thematic and also pretty interesting. Then we have the on-play feed hero, which is pretty straightforward, and then we have this strange effect, and it's not strange, but probably a bit too complex for this card already. So my take on this card would probably be to decrease its cost to 3, decrease its sell points to 1, because really then you will understand why. Then on play / on turn feed hero magic, because really you want to have something that this card does when it is played. And you would already say, but there it is, the card that it does when it is on play. But I would remove this last line, because I think that it is too much, it's too complex for this card. I like the idea in its simplicity, and with this other effect, it probably feels too much and too complex for this card. It was already good with those two effects. So again, another time, I will go for 3 cost, 1 health points, because then it will be too much defensive with 2 health points, on buy restock idol, and on play / on turn feed hero magic. So definitely synergizes with the feel of the hero, which should be the thing with hero cards. They should be better in the hero decks. And it's also a pretty interesting card, and again, with the change the hero, also a pretty interesting hero and a balanced one in my opinion. And then at the first place we have Brom from Rat Elemental. It's an hero card from Daramek, and its hero power reads ally reduced to 0 life plus 1 charge, spend the charge equal to victim's life to sacrifice foes. And its hero card is Charnel Pit. It's an idol, it costs 6 gold, and it has 0 out of 6 charges, and it reads foe or ally dies plus 1 charge, and activate to attack randomly and lose 1 charges. So I gave this card 4 points out of 5 in design and 4 points out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 12 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because talking about the hero, I really do like the effect. It's pretty interesting, and by the way, this means that, for example, the Riddle's Loader could target your enemy's foes, so the enemy's allies, and can only be done if their health is less than the charges your hero has. So it will be pretty much a complex effect. Like for example, another thing will be Carnage. It will sacrifice foes first, then instead your one's allies first, until it has no more charges to sacrifice anything. Actually, there is nothing with less health than your charges or equal. So and then after that it will sacrifice your allies too. So definitely a pretty interesting and really fun effect in my opinion. But again, you already may have noticed what I'm gonna say next. It's too complex. So that's why I didn't went for 5 out of 5 design, but I detracted 1 point out of it. But still a pretty good and interesting effect. Then for the balance, pretty much goes the same thing. I think it's a pretty balanced card. The only thing I will do is probably the Charnel Pit is a bit too slow. It is true that it is a really nice effect. Like for example, already I may see some synergies. Like for example, since it is random, you don't want to actually hurt yourself too much when it attacks your side of the board. And so for that reason, you can just make lepers joins the battle. So actually, even when it attacks your side of the board, the lepers just retaliate and attack the other side anyway. Or for example, Scavengers plus Shrine of Rebirth could make for somewhat an infinite combo. Like for example, you go Charnel Pit, then probably a bunch of them. Then you go with Scavengers and like for example 5 Shrine of Rebirth, which should on average be 55% chance to return to end, plus the 55% chance of the Scavengers already. So pretty much on average on 100 chance to just return to the end. So you go Scavenger, then you attack with the Charnel Pit. If the Charnel Pit hits the Scavengers, it returns in your hand. Then you replay it. The Charnel Pit would have gained a charge out of the death of the scavenger, and so you can repeat, and by doing that in the process you gain 1 resource every time you replay the scavenger, and so that should be a semi-infinite combo. Obviously it is statistically infinite, and it is not that consistent, but it could work. So again, with that said, those are the synergies. They are pretty interesting and yet balanced. But for the channel pit, again, I will probably just reduce its cost to 4, and probably just for aesthetics another time I will go for 0 out of 4 charges, just to match the cost and the charge, like it is already done in the channel pit. So another time, that is good design if it is also aesthetic. And so if I remove 2 gold, I should also remove 2 charges just for aesthetics. And aesthetics should not be followed all the times despite balance or design in the first place. But if the design or the balance doesn't become weaker or less balanced or whatever, if it is also aesthetics, then you should try and grab also the aesthetics if it doesn't hinder the balance or the design. So that's it for this card. So, that's it for this video. Hope you liked it and find it useful. Be sure to leave down below a comment to let me know what you want to see in the next videos. And as always, see ya!